For some reason, there seems to be a major debate around One Piece characters and whether or not they could reach speeds around or greater than light speed. But if you ask me, this debate has a very simple and obvious resolution. The fact of the matter is that One Piece characters can move at light speed, and despite what my thumbnail says, I have no interest in having my mind changed. I just thought the thumbnail was funny. Instead of having my mind changed, I'm going to be proving to you that many characters from One Piece are in fact faster than light, and in this video I will provide an enormous amount of evidence and calculations to prove this. So get ready to believe that light is no longer the fastest thing in the universe. The One Piece universe, that is. Hello Internet, JoJo here, and welcome to IdeaShock. Has anyone else noticed that no one makes an argument against characters like Naruto or Ichigo being lightspeed, but when it comes to Luffy being lightspeed, everybody loses their minds? This is weird to me because what if I told you that there is far more evidence supporting Luffy being lightspeed than there is for both Naruto and Ichigo put together? Like, Naruto has what, one actual lightspeed feat and a couple lightning feats? While Bleach has like one lightspeed reaction feat, and it's not even done by the main character. And is there any lightning in Bleach? I know there's at least one lightning Zanpakuto, but we never actually see it fully in action. Now, of course, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Naruto and Ichigo are slower than light. In fact, I believe they're far faster, despite their franchise being surprisingly barren of lightspeed feats. But in just this one video, we're going to discuss more than 20 feats in One Piece that involve light in some major way. Some of these are lightning feats, a few others are photon feats, and other ones involve lasers. There's a lot of variation in these feats that we're going to talk about. The funny thing about calculating all these feats is that there are actually so many that I'm going to have to break this up into two parts. But don't worry, personally, I think that the best are actually in the first part. So with that said, we'll be moving chronologically throughout the series, starting with some lightning feats and ending on a high note with Marco vs. Kizaru. Let's go. Now, we could waste a lot of time talking about the many times that One Piece characters are specifically shown to be able to see the movement of a lightning bolt, but let's be honest, not a single person in the world cares about those feats, and on top of that, they're actually pretty boring. So instead of dwelling on the boring stuff, let's just skip ahead to the feats that we're talking about. So the first two feats that actually matter are very straightforward, and are done by the most unexpected person, Nami. In chapter 283, during the Skypiea story arc, Nami found herself face to face against the lightning god Enel, or Eneru, depending on which translation you're used to. Taking her height of 169 centimeters, and we can find that she's about 16 meters away from him. Due to the fact that the leader of a lightning bolt moves at about 220,000 miles per hour, it would cover this distance in only 162.686 microseconds. Luckily, Nami is able to dodge out of the way before she got flash fried. Taking the straw hat's diameter and using it as a ruler, we can find that she moved 225.86 centimeters. So for Nami to move this distance before the lightning hit her, she would have had to be moving at a minimum of 31,000 miles per hour or Mach 40. Yet this is only small time when compared to the next time she dealt with a bolt of lightning. Only a few panels later, Nami shows that she is fast enough to use her climb attack and redirect the bolt. Nami seems to be creating and moving the bubble as the lightning travels across it. Now, it should be noted that in the anime, Nami did make the bubble before the lightning hit it. However, considering the time frame that the anime shows, the speed that we're going to calculate should be incredibly similar. Using the length of Nami's lower leg, we can find the length of the bubble's arc to be about 293.24 centimeters. The distance that the lightning moved across the bubble is about 166.645 centimeters. Considering the speed it was moving at, we discovered that Nami had to be able to react in just under 16.9443 microseconds. This is about 10 times faster than the first bolt she dealt with. Applying this distance to this time, and Nami must be moving at around 387,000 miles per hour, or a little bit more than 1.5 times the speed of a lightning bolt. This might seem crazy, especially for Nami, but it's not that crazy when you take into consideration some of the other feats that she does later on in the series. This third feat is a bit hard to pin down. You see, when Usopp shows up to fight Eneru, he has shown that he is very capable of dodging close-range lightning. Unfortunately, we cannot see where the bolts are moving from, but for the sake of simplicity and expediency, we're just going to say that it started about 2 Usopps above Usopp, or 348 centimeters above him. A bolt of lightning would cover this distance in a minuscule 35.384 microseconds. Looking how far he moved in that time, which is roughly equivalent to his own height, Usopp must have been moving at about 110,000 miles per hour, or about half the speed of the bolt. Of course, we could just scale him to Nami, but one thing at a time. The next several feats are almost identical to the previous two, as they have similar speeds and distances. The major difference in these feats being both Nami and Usopp are here, and this feat is just Usopp. Well, let's be real here, he's actually doing a very impressive aerial acrobatics maneuver.
It's a perfect 10.
Okay, it's impressive as long as you don't see how he lands, but both these feats have similar speeds. There are a few more lightning dodging feats in the Skypiea arc, but they're less impressive and boring, I guess that's the only word to use. So let's just move on to the feats that you're actually here for. The feats that involve light.
This is where the fun begins.
The first of these true Lightspeed feats involve the pirate Silver Fox Foxy. I know, right?
Every night in my dreams, I see you.
Foxy's Devil Fruit allows him to fire beams out of his fingers. These beams are specifically described as being a special type of photon beam, and photons move at the speed of light. For reference, we've been talking about the leader of a lightning bolt, which moves at 220,000 miles per hour, but now we're going to talk about light speed, which is about 670 million miles per hour. That's a tad bit faster than the leader of a lightning bolt. Considering how we have nothing to use as a ruler in this panel, this means that we have nothing to use to find the distance between Luffy and Foxy. However, we can see that there are 7 photon rings between Foxy and Luffy. By comparing the distance the ring stretches out in this other panel, we can find that Luffy's about 3.58 meters away from Foxy. As we mentioned, photons move at light speed, so for Luffy to react in this time, he would need to be able to react in just under 12 nanoseconds. Taking the diameter of the photon ring as our ruler, and we find the distance that the blur moved, or the distance that Luffy moved because he is the blur in this panel, is 247.87 centimeters. So, taking this time of 12 nanoseconds and this distance of about 2.5 meters, we find that Luffy must have moved at 464 million miles per hour, or just over 2/3 the speed of light. The thing is, this is a good while before the time skip, and it's not the only time that he dodges lasers in this arc. Looking at this next panel, and yet again, we see that there's obviously nothing to use as a ruler. However, just like we did before, we can use the average distance between the rings here to find that Foxy was, yet again, within about 3.58 meters. And due to this similar distance, this feat should be effectively identical as the one we just calculated, giving Luffy a reaction time of 12 nanoseconds. This next feat is, without a doubt, my favorite feat with Foxy, because Luffy is reacting to the reflections in this mirror. By measuring where Luffy's feet should be in relation to the tiles on the floor, we end up with Luffy being about 250 centimeters from the mirror. It would take about 8.34 nanoseconds for the beam to reflect off this mirror and hit Luffy. But what I found to be the most interesting thing here is that Luffy is actually able to react to Foxy telling him to look behind him, say several words, and process what he's seeing all before the beams hit him. Once Luffy turns to the mirror, he says 4.5 words and then moves, using a 160 word per minute pace, and we find that to Luffy, those 8.34 nanoseconds are the equivalent of 1.6575 seconds. Considering that the average person can react to events in about 0.25 of a second, this means that Luffy's reaction time could be as fast or faster than 1.2579 nanoseconds. For the record, this is Luffy's single greatest reaction feat in the entire series, though some do come pretty close. Of course, this is also not including things like Gear Second or Haki, which make him much faster. This is also not an actual speed, but being able to react at this distance definitely puts him at light speed or even faster. However, due to how this feat is presented, we can't find a good distance to compare this to, so that's the thing. But don't worry, there's still quite a bit to come. This last Foxy feat is simply one that we can find by counting rings. This beam is about 5 rings in the distance, so it's about 200 centimeters, and it would take about 6.69 nanoseconds to reach Luffy. The diameter of the 5th ring is about 163.53 centimeters, so using that and assuming that Luffy started moving from the middle of the beam, we find that he must have moved about 2.5 meters. Taking this time, 6.69 nanoseconds, and this distance, we find that Luffy had to have been moving at over 830 million miles per hour, or 1.23 times the speed of light. And now we're back to Nami. When Nami first used her climb attack to call a lightning storm, she ended up almost getting herself fried as well. By using her height in this panel and the distance to the ground, the lightning had to have covered about 4.5 meters. For Nami to react in order not to fry herself, she must have been able to react in about 45 microseconds. some of you might think that the lightning just missed her, but that's a big nope. You see, much like teenage boys, and probably some girls out there somewhere, the lightning is actually being attracted to Nami, as it is towards all humans. This is due to the fact that humans are just filled with minerals and water, and lightning loves that kind of stuff. It's villain time now. This feat is actually pretty similar to the one we just talked about, except with a surprising twist. It's actually Agent Khalifa from CP9 who's doing the lightning dodging. By assuming the trajectory of Nami's lightning ball, we can find that Khalifa had to have reacted and used her Devil Fruit before the bolt hit her, so she would only have about 41 microseconds to react in. Now, I bet that many of you were waiting for me to discuss Zoro, weren't you? When Zoro went up against Kuma while on Thriller Bark, there were many times that Zoro had to dodge Lightspeed projectiles. So, using Zoro's face and Kuma's hand in this image, we find they are about 14.2 meters apart. At this distance, Kuma's projectile would only take 47 nanoseconds to reach Zoro. Now, after this attack is fired, it takes 3 panels to reach Zoro, meaning that each panel represents 15.788 nanoseconds. Assuming that Zoro dodged at the last minute, he must have been able to react in one of those 15.788 nanoseconds. Using Zoro's face as a ruler, we find that he moved his head about 56.19 centimeters. For him to do this, he must have been moving at about 79.6 million miles per hour. If I was to bet on one Lightspeed feat that most One Piece fans know about, I would have to go with this one. That time when Kuma began to fire off many Lightspeed projectiles at Zoro. The distance between each paw pad projectile is about 1 meter, and Zoro was more than capable of moving around them. For these Lightspeed projectiles to travel 1 meter at light speed, Zoro would have to react in about 3.33 nanoseconds. However, Zoro's reaction time is likely much faster than this, as he had to dodge quite a few of them at the same time, as well as the fact that he was actually getting closer to the source of them, so it should have become progressively harder for him to dodge them. This feat easily proves that Zoro is several times faster than light, as if he was just equal to light, he would get pummeled by all these attacks because there are just so many of them. Chronologically, Ace reacting to Blackbeard's gravity pull is the next feat we need to talk about, but I actually already calculated this in the same video that I discussed Mereoleona and Natsu. Basically, when Ace fought Blackbeard and Blackbeard used his black hole powers to pull Ace towards him at light speed, Ace was able to react and move slightly faster than Blackbeard could pull him, giving him a reaction time of about 8.8 nanoseconds and a movement speed of 676 million miles per hour, which is just over light speed. If you want more details, you can check out that video. I'll try to put it here. Next comes when the crew is out in the Sabaody archipelago and Nami launches her lightning bolt directly from her Climattact. It's next to impossible to get the time frame they're reacting in, but as we've discussed before in the previous calculations, saying they are as fast as this bolt, about 220,000 miles per hour, shouldn't be that far off. But the cast actually might be dodging the return stroke, which moves at 220 million miles per hour, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, finally we're talking about someone who's not a Straw Hat. This time we get to talk about a different supernova, Trafalgar Law. When he first came across the Pacifista, it fired its laser at him, and like most characters that we've discussed so far in this video, he's able to react to it. But unlike the rest of the characters we talked about, Law teleported himself out of the way. To be fair, the Pacifista's lasers could be a plasma beam, but considering the other Lightspeed feats we've had, and the fact that this weapon is based off Admiral Kizaru's Devil Fruit, which is literally light, these should be at the same speed as Foxy's beams. Due to how Law's power works, we're not able to find his speed, but instead we'll have to settle with reaction time. Taking the height of the Pacifista and measuring it against the distance the beam traveled, and we find that Law must have reacted in about 59.64 nanoseconds. Now, even then, Law's power does require hand movement and a command, so he should definitely be on par with any of the reaction times that we already calculated for Luffy. While the crew is on the Sabaody archipelago for the first time, we are introduced to Marine Admiral Kizaru. Now, Kizaru is one of those characters that, by just existing, he changed the entire landscape of the power system of One Piece. You see, Kizaru is widely considered to be the weakest of the 3 current and 3 previous admirals, and because we know he can move at light speed, we basically have to scale all the other admirals to somewhere near him in speed. I mean, after all, he was never even considered to be in the running to become the new fleet admiral. But here's the thing, I think that Kizaru himself, without his Devil Fruit, might actually be faster than light, as Kizaru can still scale to characters who are light speed despite the fact of them not having light as a power. But we'll get to Marco in a minute. This next one's a good one. This next feat comes when Luffy and the rest of the crew come across their first Pacifista. It fires a laser at Luffy and he's able to dodge it. So, by taking the size of Pacifista's hand and the diameter of the Straw Hat, we find that Luffy and the robot are about 7 meters apart. It would take the laser only 23 nanoseconds to reach him, but he's definitely able to move out of the way in that time. Moving to this other panel and using the straw hat again, we find that he moved 7.17 meters from the epicenter of the explosion, which is where he should be considering the Pacifista is trying to hit him. Taking this time and the 7.17 meters Luffy moved, and he should be moving at about 103% the speed of light. I was going to talk about Apu, but I don't really want to, because he's quite literally my least favorite of the supernovas, and probably one of my least favorite characters in general, so let's just move on. And we're back to Luffy. When Luffy comes across another Pacifista, it fires a laser at him and he dodges it. Pretty standard for this video, right? We know that he was dodging the laser because it was already fired when he began to move. Using the same process that we did for many times before, we find the beam had to have covered 32 meters. This would give Luffy a reaction time of around 103 nanoseconds. As you might see, this is, by a relatively wide margin, the slowest reaction time we've calculated when actually talking about Lightspeed feats. Okay, so everyone and their brother knows about this fight. When Rayleigh saves Zoro from Kizaru. In the manga and anime, they play it off like observation hockey was the only thing allowing Rayleigh to keep up with Kizaru, but that's stupid, I think the proper word is. I mean, imagine they're tied to a train track and you see a train coming. You know it's going to happen, but you can't move fast enough to get out of the way. The same applies here. Sure, Rayleigh might know what's going to happen, but if he can't move fast enough or doesn't have the ability to stop it, he's gonna get wrecked. To be able to intercept any object that is moving at light speed, you have to be close to light speed itself. Let's also not forget that Kizaru also has observation hockey as well, so Rayleigh is definitely able to move at light speed, if not far faster. This next feat is one that I've known about for a while. It's when Whitebeard was attacked by Kizaru, and he's just like, "Oh, it's a little bright," while the lasers were bearing down on him. Seriously, talk about a flex. Kizaru is one of the strongest soldiers in the entirety of the Marines, but Whitebeard treats him like a nightlight. So measuring the distance between Whitebeard and the light, we get a distance of about 62.5 meters. By removing the distance in front of Whitebeard that Marco stopped the lasers at, about 16.1 meters in front of him, we find that these lasers would have covered this distance in about 163.785 nanoseconds. However, taking the spoken words after the laser is fired and applying a rather slow speaking pace of 120 words per minute, because that's how Whitebeard talks, he's pretty slow. Then multiplying that by the average human reaction time, about a quarter of a second, and we find that Whitebeard should be able to react in a minimum of about 7.44 nanoseconds. Though being an emperor, he should definitely be much faster, definitely comparable to Luffy. Before we move on to our last feat, let me just remind you that if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do it. If you're not new, then could you make sure that you're getting notifications when I release a video? I am suspecting that many of you might not be getting notified. Or, of course, I could be paranoid. I'm not paranoid, am I? Wait a minute. Am I being paranoid about being paranoid? What kind of mind-bending paranoid paradox is this? Man, I need to get out of here before my mind explodes. Here we go, the final feat of this video. This is when Marco intercepts Kizaru's attack. This is actually pretty weird because in the manga, we only see Marco after he intercepts the attack and not where he started moving from, so it's pretty hard to find the distance that he moved. What we do know is that Marco only starts moving after Whitebeard finishes flexing on Kizaru, and this means that Marco must have moved from wherever he was to in front of Whitebeard in only 29.779 nanoseconds. So because we lack a lot of information from the manga, we're gonna have to take some information from the anime. And in the anime, Marco begins moving from ground level on the ice, then moves almost directly upward to intercept the attack. Taking the height of Whitebeard and the Moby Dick, and adding the height above the deck of the ship that Marco is at when he stops the lasers, and we find that he moved about 60.58 meters above the ice. Now, when he's on the ground, he's almost parallel with Whitebeard, but he's in front of him when he intercepts the lasers. So, taking the distance in front of Whitebeard and the height of the ice, we find that Marco must have traveled about 62 meters at a slight angle. For Marco to cover this distance in 29 nanoseconds, he would need to be moving at 4,681,000 miles per hour, or 6.98 times the speed of light. When I first promised to make this video, I thought that I could get them all into one video, but to cover all these feats, I'm gonna have to make this a two-parter, and the second part of this video will be out soon, if I don't get distracted, which happens a lot. So, all that and more next time on IdeaShock. Until then, thanks for watching, see you next time, remember to stay spectacular, JoJo, out.
And lucky for you, I've got places to go, things to destroy, stuff to steal.